Hello and welcome to another episode of the EcomGold podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. And in this episode, we speak to Chad Carlton. Chad Carlton has had a pretty tough road to success and he's still building. But the reason why I invited Chad on the show is because I was particularly interested in how he runs his 3PL and why he chose to run a 3PL, having run brands, having even been a farmer for a little while. I wanted to know really, what is a 3PL? Where do they fit into the e-commerce system? And he's doing it in stealth. He doesn't actually take on new clients. You cannot just approach Chad and his 50,000 square foot facility, I think he's actually got 2 of those now, and ask to become a client, I guess you would say, of their 3PL. You have to be selected by Chad. So how does he get so much demand? What is he doing right? How is he servicing his customers so they keep coming back? What is 3PL innovation? What does the future of 3PL look like? And breaking down what a 3PL is, who should use one, why and when, is all coming up in today's episode, which is brought to you by SendLane. SendLane is the e-commerce focused email, SMS, and reviews tool that you should be using for your business, especially if you're using something like Klaviyo. It's slightly overpriced, in my opinion. The features were built a little while ago, and SendLane, from what I've seen, from what I've heard, is just miles better and miles more cost effective. So I get on board with them while you still can at this kind of a price. And book a demo with the team. They're great and they will actually get behind your business, take the time to learn about your deliverability and get those emails, SMS and reviews up and running for you very, very quickly. So check out SendLane, links in the show note below. And if you're going to the event, enjoy it. This show is also brought to you by Rewind. Rewind is the application that should be on every Shopify store if you actually care about protecting your business and not wasting time when things go wrong. Why? Because they offer a backup button, an undo button, so the store is backed up. And if you do make a mistake, you can just hit a button, restore a previous version. That includes data, so not just your theme, it's things like orders, customers, images, products, everything like that is covered by that. But it also gives you a staging site, which is important, so you can do all of your testing, changes, app installs on a site that is exactly the same as your live environment, a carbon copy. But when you do it, you're not doing it directly on your live site. So if something does go wrong, it's not going to affect your business. So best practice for e-commerce, you should be doing it already. But if you're not, please do check out Rewind. Over to you, Chad, on to today's show. Chad, thank you so much for joining us today on the EcomGold podcast. How you doing, sir?
Wonderful. My pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Tell us about your breakfast. You just told me you make your own concoction of smoothies / protein shakes. I want to know what's in it and why you drink it.
I think I shouldn't have revealed that fact. I guess I'm one of those guys where I'm like, if some is good, then more is better. So I was doing a protein shake with athletic greens, and maybe I had some like mud water, or another bag. And one day I was like dumping it all together, and then I just mixed it up and chug that first thing in the morning, and I'm good until then.
Wow. Power shakes. I like it.
Yeah, it's a power shake.
You're sitting in your warehouse. For people that are just listening to this, what I can see behind me behind Chad is enormous amounts of shelving, racking, cardboard, and you're right in the thick of it, man. So just talk us through your view.
This is a 50,000 foot facility that we're here in Springfield, Missouri. I'm sure we'll get into this later, but I've been in a whole lot of different places. When we leased this building, it was because we had just blown out another 50,000 foot facility, and it had this really pretty office that's up on the second floor over here, and it's overlooking the facility. And I was up there, and the rest of some of the administrative team was up there, but we just I didn't feel like communication was where we needed it to be. I didn't feel as connected to things on the floor as I had when I first started the business, and I was right there on the floor. So one day I set everybody out, and now the entire leadership team is right here on the floor with desks on all sides of me. Sorry if you can hear the tape guns and pallet jacks and forklifts going on in the back, but I just found being right in the mix dramatically improved the business. So we're down here, and for the record, it's morning here in Missouri. Yesterday, I'm not sure if you won't be able to see this. It's 86 in here already, and yesterday it got up to 95 with 76% humidity. So we're I can't go upstairs during the summer and then come back down in the fall. That's not going to jive with the employees. So I've got to sweat it out.
Sweat pit in
Yes.
sweat pit. Well, listen, the sound effects are warranted because this episode is all about teaching me what a 3PL is properly, teaching the listeners how to use a 3PL properly, and really a masterclass in logistics and everything that goes into getting products to and from, in some occasions, customers. But before we get there, your background, it struck me. Well, first and foremost, Chad impressed me straight off the bat because he sent me a show plan when I asked him to be on the show, which is always a great start, and just tells me the kind of guy that you are, and that actually it's probably good that you're running a 3PL because you must be super detail orientated and a really good organization and planning expert. But can you just tell us how you got here? Because it's an interesting story. And I actually read it to my fiance and said, man, this guy's been through some shit. Like, talk us through some of those harder years before you got to where you are today.
Well, I must qualify ahead of time that I am not the organizing and planning expert. In fact, I am just the antithesis of that. I think I'm real good at getting people to the train station, but I'm not the best at making the trains run on time. Fortunately, I've surrounded myself with people who are the polar opposite of me. They most days I feel more like I'm being managed more than I'm managing people. But for the good of the organization, I think that's what needs to happen. So, my background, I was born here in Southwest Missouri. I moved around a little bit, but I spent the vast majority of my life here. We're in the heart of the Ozarks, if that means anything, and we're a couple hours south of Kansas City. I grew up a great life. I really wanted for nothing, but I was 18 in 2008. I'm 33 now. And my father was a builder, and we went bankrupt in spectacular fashion. He was a very talented guy, so he had beautiful buildings that were being erected all over town. And then when lending froze and money got tight, those really nice office spaces were the last thing to lease. So we went from really having everything to literally having nothing. They repossessed our cars. They foreclosed on our house. We ended up with nowhere to live except for this 30-acre plot of land that the city decided to lease back to us just because they didn't want to maintain it. And it was on the outside edge of town. It had a house that was going to be bulldozed and a couple of barns. And then suddenly we moved in there. It was 3 years of very hard work, clawing my way back up to just get back to the baseline. I worked 3 jobs. I went to school, and then I started a farm. I got 100 laying hens and some cows, and I sold eggs to the local businesses. For my family, it was a very challenging time, but the truth is I had so much fun. I really leaned into it, and it was obviously probably the most formative experience of my life, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I got the work ethic and the experience that I needed, which I just hadn't gotten to that point in my life, and that set me up for. I think that set me up for success. I then found myself doing a lot of food service work. I owned a couple of restaurants. I owned like a fast casual Greek deli, which I loved. I worked in fine dining for a long time. Then I started the 1 Million Cups chapter here in Springfield. And to be honest with you, I was 22 at the time. I don't really know what we did right, except for just turn on the beacon to try to get the entrepreneurs in our community to get together for coffee. Before long, it was 150 entrepreneurs every Wednesday morning, and I got to interview 2 businesses for 6 to 8 minutes, and then MC the show for 20 minutes of Q&A with each of them. And it's 1 Million Cups out of the Kauffman Foundation is a great program. It really allows. It's not so much a sales pitch as it is an entrepreneur talking to other entrepreneurs. Here's the nuts and bolts of my business. I want to crowdsource some solutions. And the last question is always, how can we as a community help you? So I got to a front row seat for a whole lot of collaboration, and I got to interview hundreds of business owners. And I think that was my business education and a pressure cooker there. So after that, I married into e-commerce. My now ex-wife had started a drop shipping company called everythingkitchens.com in 2001. She deserves a tremendous amount of credit for coming up also with essentially nothing and then growing this company very conservatively until 8 years ago when we met. My first day was Black Friday. She was like, "Hey, we're about to get killed. Do you want to come get some packages out the door with us?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I absolutely had a ball. There was so much operationally from these other service-oriented or food service businesses that I had been in that was very similar to the operations of fulfillment and e-commerce. So after the turn of the year, I began to take on some more responsibility and quickly became the chief operating officer there. At the time, we were doing about 16 million, and before I transitioned over to run this business, we had scaled up to 50 million. So there was an enormous number of unique challenges on the road between 16 and 50, and that, I guess, that was my e-commerce pressure cooker education.
Yeah, what a roadshow! How much did a dozen eggs cost from you back in the day?
Oh, I tried to get clever about it. So I saw they were going for about $3, but then I learned that there's these chickens called Americanas, and they lay blue and green eggs. So I'd always mix in like one or two blue and green ones with the brown eggs, and then I could charge $5 a dozen.
Surely you just buy a couple of dollar tin of paint and just.
There were days I considered, yeah.
God, man. So and then how did you decide that you just wanted to chuck a roof up and become a postman tycoon for brands? When did you start to develop this
3PL? Yes.
Yeah.
We scaled Everything Kitchens pretty significantly, and then in January of 2020, our largest dinnerware manufacturer came to us. Now this is pre-COVID, right? And said, "Hey, would you consider being our 3PL?" We already sold 7 figures of their stuff at wholesale. It is a challenging job. There's 250 different shapes. There's 2,500 different SKUs. It's all heavy, fragile, open stock, rough bottom china. It likes to chip and vibrate and crack. And it's an average of 6 pieces per order. So when you're talking about that amount of weight going from A to B with, and you have to pack each of those orders individually, there's no machine to do that. They were using another very big 3PL, and they were breaking 1 in every 8 packages, and that was just abysmal, right? But to their credit, it's a hard job, and if you've got 3,000 employees, you're not going to be able to teach them to manage that type of nuance. So we said yes in January when it was a great idea. We had some extra space in our warehouse, and it was just going to ride on the back of our existing operation. But then, of course, COVID hit, and we grew by 400% that year. So they didn't get us inventory until 2 weeks before Black Friday. We thought it was going to take up some extra space in the warehouse, which, of course, we had none. So we leased another facility. We received 200,000 pieces of dinnerware from them 2 weeks before Black Friday, having never been a 3PL ever before. And we shipped 250,000 pieces for them before the end of the year. We got breakage to 1 in 200, which we thought was pretty good. And then we came to the other side of the year, and we knew nothing about 3PLs. We'd never been a 3PL or used one. So I think that ignorance and idealism just led us to say, you know what, I bet there's other companies out there with a tough problem to solve that don't would never be able to work with a commoditized 3PL because there's too much nuance to managing the fulfillment operation for their company. So let's see if there's other people out there. Those will be pretty sticky relationships that we can deliver a lot of value to. I think it'll be a win-win. And that turns out we were right. Through referral business alone, we got to 1 million shipments a year, and we hadn't even named the company yet. So then it became kind of this joke for this big organization. Now we've got another 50,000 foot facility that's nearly full, and we still have no name. Eventually we named it The Good Company. We're goodcompanyships.com. And that was about a year ago.
Wild story. So let's give you a chance. I don't see that there's anyone really better to give a definition to what a 3PL is to the world, to the listener, to someone like me who knows the term. What would you say a 3PL is? Obviously, third-party logistics, how you would define an acronym, but what would you actually say it is in a nutshell? If I was an Uber driver and I said, what do you do? What is that? How would you explain it to me?
Well, if you were an Uber driver, I would probably say they are fulfillment centers that store products, pick, pack, and ship on behalf of other companies who are generally conducting business online or in a distributed manner. If I was to define it how the e-commerce industry defines it, I would say that I learned 3PLs have a PR problem, and that what a 3PL is to the majority of e-commerce companies is not what they should be. What they should be is a silent extension of your brand that takes an enormous amount of the heavy lifting of a huge component of every business, which is supply chain management, fulfillment, and distribution to their customers off of the brand's plate so it can liberate them to do the things that only they can do. Ideally, those things that they're absolutely the best at.
Yeah, I think that's a great definition. So give us a kind of insight into the complexity of the supply chain and how far you go down the supply chain as a 3PL and the services that you offer. Receiving goods, shipping goods, like what can you or what do you take on for brands? What do you take off their plate?
I would say I've learned that we are at the far end of the spectrum on this, where we attempt to be involved in as much as we possibly can. We don't make a foolish assumption that we can be great at everything, but instead, I've learned that a really great cross-functional relationship is one that has high expectations and high communication, and our incentives are aligned. A 3PL is oftentimes downwind from problems that the brand is experiencing. If you're thinking about the entire supply chain from the time that it's manufactured to the time that it reaches the customer, the baton gets passed quite a lot. And we have things upwind and downwind from us that can be creating issues, but both of them are putting pressure on us in the center. So if issues with the manufacturer and the overseas shipping company, or the inventory that actually shows up, or the carriers that are on the other side to deliver to their final customers have a problem, we want to be able to take as much responsibility as we possibly can, which usually means we need to have a very deep relationship with our clients, one that has a lot of trust and allows us to manage the passing of the baton from before us to after us, so that the brand can rely on only having to twist one person's arm, which is ours, to make sure that everybody in that chain is following procedure, all the way down to, it would be our ambition, I think, in the next year or so to even be able to communicate with some of the brand's customers on their behalf for easy transactional things like updating an address or processing an exchange order, or some of these transactional things that oftentimes brands have to, they hire a 3PL, but then they end up hiring someone internally to manage the 3PL. And if you're doing that, your 3PL is not doing enough for you. So we would just presume, let's take as much of that off of your plate as we possibly can, so that you can really liberate your time and resources to managing the other parts of the business.
Yeah, nice. So a bit of innovation in there as well. That sounds like a great idea. I often think that there's a lot of innovation that can come from 3PLs. I think that's a really good place to start because, like you said, there's a PR problem. I think more with smaller brands, like 7-8 figure brands. I think the 9-figure brands get it. I don't know if that's across the spectrum, but certainly from what I hear. But with returns, I mean, there's just so much room for innovation in extending out the services of a 3PL, and I think that is somewhere that it sounds like you're already exploring. So so you obviously do the warehousing, the transportation, do you get involved with that? Do you actually communicate with the drivers, the logistics, the ports, the manufacturers? Or do you still take your lead from your customers, i.e. the brands?
We haven't made it all the way back to the manufacturer yet, but as soon as the goods are ready and it's being arranged for transport, it's usually the time that we get involved, all the way to at the other side of us. Once it's departed our facility, we're managing those carriers and ensuring accountability and resolving issues that are outside of our tangible control, but not outside of our influence to seek some sort of rectification.
I imported a bulk import of products into Shopify, and I did not put in the meta fields the created date, and that sent the whole filtering system haywire because you could no longer filter collections by newest in first or date added to the website, which was a really big problem for this quite large fashion brand. If I didn't have Rewind, that would have been a complete pickle. It would have taken hours, if not days, to sort out. All of the while these products are live and really messing up their merchandising. A mistake by me, absolutely, but fortunately I had the foresight to install Rewind before I made any of these changes, and I was able to just click a button, restore the site back to a previous version just a few minutes before I made that fatal error, and no one was any the wiser. That's the value of Rewind. That's just one use case, okay? One use case. There are hundreds of other use cases. Have it on there because when you need it, you'll text me or you'll tweet me and say, thank you so much, Finn, for recommending that I installed Rewind. You saved my bacon. Back to today's show.
So I thought what would be fun is if we do some mini masterclasses taught by you completely without preparation, because I think that's really fair. Oh my goodness. But I, wanted to make sure that you're switched on and you know your stuff. You clearly do, so you can absolutely handle this. We'll start you off with a simple and easy masterclass. Basis of this masterclass is the benefits of partnering with a 3PL versus doing your own logistics. Talk us through cost savings, scaling, core competencies, all of those sorts of things. Generally, we're looking at what are the benefits of actually engaging a 3PL? When should you engage a 3PL? And what will improve for you as a brand if you engage the right 3PL?
Love it. When should you engage with a 3PL? When the cost opportunity of you handling fulfillment yourself is a significantly greater expense to you than what you could be doing. Why partner with a 3PL in the beginning? Because the fixed costs associated with managing fulfillment rely on scale economies. You need a high density of product wherever it is. You need a good amount of product going out, and you need enough that you have good negotiated rates for the primary cost centers, postage being number one, materials being number two. A lot of times those things are not accessible to a brand until they hit 3,000 to 5,000 orders a month. once they've hit 15,000 orders a month, depending on the product profile and the complexity involved, a lot of people are thinking, maybe we should take this in-house. And I would say back to that, if operations and supply chain and fulfillment is a massive distraction for your business, the amount of time and effort that it takes to manage it is not going to plateau and decrease through additional layers of management, probably until you hit 50,000 orders a month. It's going to be a substantial undertaking, and then you also need to become an expert in this field to make sure that you're staying current and negotiating well year over year. The time and emotional energy that it takes away from the entire C-suite is often really significant. However, you're a great client for any 3PL. You're the fulfillment operations at that scale. Anybody ought to be able to make a good amount of margin for a fair price on your behalf that's comparable to anything that you would be able to do in-house. Therefore, I would treat the decision to give your fulfillment over to a 3PL like an asset that you have. And over time, these 3PLs need to be working harder and harder and harder to maintain that relationship, which for us has translated to, all right, let's extend our ability to be involved outside of just the 3PL so that we can confidently say, you have truly, we're at our best when you're not thinking about us at all. So let's truly get this off of you mentally, and fiscally, it's going to be equivalent to managing it yourself. So you're buying opportunity back by continuing to use 3PL.
I'm on mute. Is Amazon FBA a best-in-class example that you like? What's your take on it? Do you look at them and see what they're doing and think, yeah, I mean, they've got all the money in the world and they're deploying it right? Like, would you do it in a similar way if you had the same resources? Or I'm interested to understand what your perception of Amazon is and how they do things.
I'm fortunate for almost the last decade, we were a top 1,000 Amazon seller in the world. We fulfilled FBA. We were a poster child for their Seller Fulfilled Prime program. We did 25 million in 1 year on Amazon, and it was 99% fulfilled by ourselves. I've very frequently revisited should this go FBA or should it not? And from a first party perspective, tried to do the justification for what can Amazon do that we can't. If your product is dead simple to pick, pack, and ship, and your ability to easily manage the nuance in your supply chain can be entirely removed from Amazon, where you're managing all of that nuance ahead of time, when it finally arrives, well, then what all you're doing is purchasing a commodity. Ignore the fact that it's Amazon. It could be any distributed warehouse provider, and you're just looking for faster and cheaper. You don't need better because you've taken all of the management of the nuance out of the responsibility of Amazon. If that's the case, then I can't see why that wouldn't be a good fit for most brands. However, I think every company has to make the choice between becoming a people or a process company. At scale, you have no choice to become a process company. Once you reach over X number of employees, certainly 100, you need to be focusing on standardization quite a lot, and managing exceptions and the deviations from those standards can be a very, very big challenge. But giant organizations have like entire change management teams that are just trying to make sure that things get changed all the way to the ground floor consistently. I guess that's a long way of saying if your business and your product profile can take all of the complexity out of the supply chain to where the net savings of being able to send it to someone like comparable to an FBA facility is so substantial, then I think that there's a good case to be made for going with a very commoditized 3PL provider. However, as a good friend of mine, Jay Sauceda, said, who used to have his own 3PL, which he sold, we're much less in the fulfillment business and much more in the exceptions management business. We're a process company for 99% of the orders that go out the door, but that last 1% can be a very, very vocal minority of customers or a small part of the supply chain that has very big ripple effects into just consuming people's time, having to deal with little exceptions. So I think best in class operationally for a company like Amazon, yeah, most certainly. They're probably the most dialed in organization. But can they use accumulated wisdom and intellect to recognize subtle problems, to expand on the possibilities that you could have as a brand, from your packaging, your transit time, your shipping cost optimization, and really dedicate the mental and emotional energy that it takes to become invested in your brand in order to execute on your behalf in the way that you would do yourself. I think you have to go with a people company that, like in our case, intentionally limits our number of customers to between 12 and 16, more or less. Once we get past that, we're not going to be able to manage nuance well or accumulate wisdom well on behalf of our clients. So, yeah, I think that's my answer.
Got it. Noted it all down mentally, of course. Curveball, change it up. I was on a plane fairly recently when I flew out here to lovely Indonesia, and I was sitting just in the right position to see the baggage get loaded onto the plane. Something I hadn't actually seen before, or maybe not paid attention to. I had the window seat, of course, which I had to fight my fiance for, but I looked out the window, and I, in that moment, was really glad that I'd spent the extra £100 to get a pretty hard shell case, because the way that these baggage handlers were ejecting the baggage and dropping it from significant heights, part of me thought they might be trying to do a YouTube video, but in full view of the whole plane, just noticeably not giving a shit about the delivery of these items, which is people's personal belongings. I'm going somewhere with this. In that, what is their incentive if they treat the packaging in that case? Are they just being paid per load? And how do you stop your team from just being like, every box that goes out, we get that's a tick, money, good, great. Surely there's something these airlines can learn from 3PLs in the handle of goods that could then be used to incentivize it. So I guess what I'm trying to understand is, how do you get breakages down? How do you train your teams? And if there are any airlines listening, please grab a notebook.
We have been approached with this situation many, many times. As a retailer, a package arrives broken, and it's not like we can say to our customer, well, call FedEx. Their expectation is that we're still responsible for everything that happens in the supply chain, and that we deal with FedEx and we'll take care of things. Now you're a brand that's using a 3PL, so you have FedEx and us potentially in the middle. As I mentioned earlier, our philosophy is we want to align our incentives identically with that of our clients. Are their customers happy? Are our customers happy? Provided that we work backwards from that objective, it becomes very, very clear that it doesn't matter whose fault it was in the supply chain. If we have an unhappy customer, we need to do everything in our power to get ahead of that. How do we manage that internally? We follow that metric identically. Obviously, we need to have things accurate and out on time, but outside of the bare minimums of service levels that you ought to be able to expect out of individuals, we're taking responsibility for those damages and immediately shipping a replacement order. We track all of that down to the individual level, and then we train heavily. We also hire exclusively for character. Nobody gets fired here for poor performance. They get coached for poor performance. We have high integrity individuals, and we have accountability systems that make sure that we're able to spot trends and teach people how to do things well, and then consistently communicate with the exact same people that are right here on the ground touching the product every single day are the same ones that are talking directly to the brand. They are heavily invested. They're generally only working on that same brand day over day. That not only accumulates wisdom, but it also endears themselves to the brand, where they really start to take ownership of who we have happy customers. So we're certainly not relying on the airlines to do a better job. We're going to buy the hard shell cases, and we're going to line it in bubble wrap and make sure that no matter what happens, we did everything in our control to try to get a good outcome.
That's insane. I can just imagine. That's almost like you could probably ask like some of your longer-term employees, like, who's the top customer for this brand, and they'd probably be able to give you a fairly accurate answer.
I think they would.
The baggage handler like grabbing a brown bag and being like, that's John's suitcase. Where's he going this week? That's insane.
Man, you find yourself like over time, you start to see brands SKUs in other people's license plates and stuff, and you're like, oh man, I'm in this deep.
I'm in deep. All right. Actually, one more thing on that. I just want to ask about. There's a common. I've always been. I've always thought that you can't use a 3PL if you have big bulky items. Is that true? Is that just generally true? Like you're selling like, I don't know, flat pack furniture or something. Barbecues.
No way. Man, there's a 3PL for everything. You need to, if you had a product profile, whether that's size, weight, hazmat, it has a whole bunch of different nuances that don't fit very well into these cookie cutter 3PL rate cards, which are going to charge you $80 to ship, a really big box full of air. Then you need to go to a boutique 3PL that will build a custom rate card oriented exactly around your business. When you've got big box 3PLs controlling a lot of the narrative and by and large giving this industry its broader reputation, I would say, it's easy to draw a string from big 3PLs don't like me as a customer, so I'm not good for 3PLs. But that isolates not just a huge portion of the industry, but it also ignores like if you have someone who is willing to create a custom tailored solution to your business, then don't use up all of that innovative capital that's there between you and the brand to just deal with big products. Really expand upon your customer experience. If you've got a publicly owned big box company who really wants to optimize for the space on its shelves, doesn't want to carry a whole lot of inventory, wants to pick, pack, and ship dead simple, small things so that they can optimize for volume out the door, and those are the metrics that they're defining success by. Boutique 3PLs are not defining success in the same manner. You may not be able to get a warehouse in Brooklyn where it's very expensive for your big bulky stuff, but in Southwest Missouri, it's inconsequential out here. We've got plenty of space for people with very unique product profiles, and we do have not just heavy and bulky stuff, but stuff that requires like a great deal of additional detail. We've got a cutting board company that we are preconditioning the cutting boards with board oil. So we get them in from the factory overseas. We unbox them all. We oil them to where they just shine beautifully. We put them on a drying rack. We rebrand them with the company's custom branding tag, and then we develop custom packaging for them to go out the door. That is such an expanded experience by comparison to what any big box 3PL is going to do. But that doesn't mean it's not still lucrative for everyone involved. You know, just being able to do this is worth plenty. And I think that the vast majority of 3PLs just don't want to take the money of people that have any level of deviation from their most ideal product profile.
An interesting thought. Do you think 3PLs could evolve into some kind of just-in-time manufacturing? I know there's like companies like Pillowcase that do their phone cases literally on order and they're produced and shipped. Do you think as technology evolves with 3D printing, but also other things like garment manufacturing and things like that, do you think there'll be a merger between 3PLs and just-in-time manufacturing?
Certainly print on demand is a good representation of that. Also, there's plenty of book publishing companies who do the exact same thing. They're doing just-in-time manufacturing. I don't know the right answer to that. I think there's probably smarter people than me who are thinking about that, but that if you follow the natural evolution of a successful relationship with a 3PL is one where they are really leaning into your business to heavily invest in being a silent extension of your operations, then just as natural market forces push downward, I can see the whole supply chain integrating assembly at least is going to happen at the 3PL level, and I'd like to think that's good for everybody.
Yeah, I don't see why wouldn't be.
You are in the D2C space. If you have a brand that's selling online and you haven't at least had a demo with SendLane, then one of two things is objectively true about you. You like setting money on fire. You like making your life more difficult. If neither of those things are true, and you are an e-commerce brand and you are selling online, you do send emails, you do send SMS, you do have reviews, or at least like to collect reviews, then there is no reason for you not to at least have had a demonstration with SendLane. They are built for e-commerce. They are the most modern platform with the best features, in my opinion, at the lowest cost. I mean, I'm not really sure what would be holding you back. Please go and check them out. Show notes below. They have an event coming up. You can still get tickets, I believe, for that event in San Diego. A link to the Commerce Roundtable in the show notes below as well. Please do go and check out SendLane if you haven't already. Back to the episode.
Right, we only did one masterclass of the three. I think I'm going to get rid of the other two and just wrap this up with something that I hope will help people. I just want some rapid fire tips, I guess. So I know there's things like, you know, if your product has a handle on it, maybe think about taking the handle off and it will fit a smaller box. And are there any just like hacky things? Like go when you're developing your product, go vertical, not horizontal. I hear that a lot. Take up less shelf space. Now, are there any actually like tried and tested? You know, this is how you can actually save some money. You said about shipping air earlier, but are there any things that you think brands could be doing better that you see on a not a daily basis? Maybe not in your 3PL, but maybe you know it happens in other 3PLs, and you think, man, if only they knew. What maybe some of those things?
Most of the time, when those types of hot tips are shared, it's like you said, we're working within a rigid system and we need to hack it a little bit to make it work better. We're trying to fit more shelf space. We're trying to sneak in under 1 pound so that the shipping rates domestically are dramatically cheaper than 1.1 pounds, which rounds up to 2 and becomes a $4 cost difference in those 3 ounces for whatever weird reason. I would say that there is enough of that that already exists within the supply chain that if your 3PL is adding another one of these rigid rules that you're trying to optimize around, you have the wrong 3PL. These are people who are so stuck to their process and absolutely will not deviate from them, that they've put upward pressure on you guys to learn their system from the inside out so that you can learn how to game it. If you can just go to somebody who says, you know what, I know your product is 2 inches taller than, and that would make it go from the medium-sized bin to the slightly oversized bin, which comes at a higher cost. It's like, stop majoring on these minor things. We know it's not about the 2 inches on the product. These are just general benchmarks for us all to try to make sure that we're costing our business appropriately, and be willing to manage some of that nuance. Develop a custom rate card for every client individually, just like we do, that aligns with the exact product profile and business objectives of their business. Then if your incentives are aligned, which is their customers happy, then everything else falls into place backwards. This is something I get a little preachy on, and I recognize this was supposed to be rapid fire, so sorry. The misalignment of incentives with 3PLs usually comes in a handful of ways. Is a 3PL making a significant margin on postage? To the 3PL, with the exception of the cash float and a little bit of managing the relationship with the carriers, it's still just a white label on a box to everybody else. If they're marking these rates up by 15 or 20%, what's the difference between sending it with the most economical carrier versus sending it next day air shipping to the 3PL? Nothing. Just a white label on a box. But if their incentive is to get you to spend more or as much as possible on shipping, then your incentives are misaligned. Make sure that their storage rates are an accurate reflection of covering their overhead. Ours is designed to cover our overhead when we hit 70% capacity, so that we can leave plenty of room for brands to scale up for Q4, and then we don't have to get desperate and take anything else. Then finally, make sure that the 3PL makes profit off of your revenue generating activities. Everything should be a function of the sale, right? There's a minimum amount to make sure that it's on the shelves. We totally understand. But outside of that, they should be primarily making their margin when they're exerting effort. It all should come back to labor and materials consumed. So for us, postage and materials are not a profit center for us. And we finally tying this all the way back to managing the rigidity of different systems. The carriers are providing enough of that rigidity that we're having to try to hack around. That leave that up to us to suggest little tweaks that can result in a meaningful change. But then just be very confident that you're paying us fairly for our effort, so that you can always count on getting our attention. We don't need to be making margin in secret, elusive ways that's not as straightforward as the points in which you guys make margin. Being able to do that, iterating it essentially 20 times over here without exception, I have found that it's a much better way to tailor the agreement to managing expectations and defining success identically.
All right, final question for you, my man. We started this conversation off. It's all started, really, if you think about it, with your eggs and the blue eggs. What are your new blue eggs? You've got a box full of 4 white eggs. Everyone else has got the same white eggs. But with your 3PL, you've got 2 blue eggs in there. What would you say your 2 blue eggs are now?
Yeah, the people that manage those exceptions. So out of every X number of orders, there's going to be a handful that deviate from the standard processes. We have people that are absolutely dedicated to each individual brand, who day over day are looking at the composition of the orders, the way that these things are shipping, and they're looking for inconsistencies and ways to build upon the fulfillment experience and the unboxing experience for each of the clients that we work with. For us, the blue egg is we are willing to limit ourselves to a certain number of customers to make sure that we always have the mental attention to dedicate to our partners.
Taking 3PL seriously. Love to see it. Thanks for educating us. I appreciate it. Anything that I should have asked you? Anything that you think people would find interesting that may be operating at a slightly higher level than me with their understanding of 3PLs that you can give away?
Yeah, I like to give away my time and advice. And because we're so transparent over here and we intentionally limit our number of customers, I can usually be very, very candid with my takes on the industry. Where I like to engage the most is Twitter. You can find me on Twitter. Please ask me questions for ways that I can help you and others. It's one of my favorite things to do.
What is the Twitter handle? I'll put it in the notes anyway, but just shout out.
Chad Carlton, ChadCarleton.
Heard it here, folks. You can't get into his 3PL, but you can get into his DMs. Love it.
True.
Catch you next time, Chad.
Thank you. Bye.
Well, another fantastic guest for the EcomGold podcast. Thanks for sticking around to the end. You must be as passionate as I am about e-commerce. And if you do see e-commerce gold on social media, please like and share. It helps me to build the show up, which means that I can get bigger and better guests every single week for our listening pleasure. Thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you next Thursday.